With some basic chemistry knowledge, you're now ready to think about how to put that to work in biology. So we want to think about what organic compounds are and what some of the major macromolecules are associated with many biological processes, in particular with building you. So we need to look at things like carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, and so on. When we look at this topic, many folks are interested primarily in how the macromolecules are formed. I want to spend a little bit of time on that, but I want to spend more time thinking about why that form is so important for the function of each of these groups. So a major theme in biology is form and function. So as we're talking about these different macromolecules that we're going to discuss, please keep in mind that the forms that they have allow them to do the functions that they do. So we want to kind of keep going back and forth between what's the shape, but then why is that shape so important for what that molecule is responsible for. So we'll look at things like these basic structures of each of our four major classes of macromolecules. Macro, of course, being large. And then we'll look at how a monomer, or a single unit, or a single building block, will build into a polymer, or a many-unit or many-building block molecule for us. Then eventually, by the end, you'll be able to think about what these molecules are in food and how eating them actually helps contribute to your structure and function overall. We've talked about lactose before, and we've talked about the enzyme lactase. So we want to think about now really the structures behind these. So I've mentioned to you before that ose is a sugar and ase is an enzyme. So when we talk about your ability to digest lactose, or the sugar associated with milk and milk products, you're actually going to use the enzyme to break it down, known as lactase. So we'll keep seeing this repeating theme of interactions between particular substrates or enzyme targets as we go through things. Now, we'll talk more later about what it actually means to be lactose intolerant, but the general idea is that we look at lactose as being an important sugar when you're young. So why is it that as you get older, you no longer are able to, in many cases, break down that lactose as well? Well, many of us, as we get older, are not as dependent on milk. So we'll think about this more, and we'll think about why this might have occurred. But for now, I want you to know that there are actually 3 mutations that have been identified that we think have now led to lactose intolerance in humans. Interesting, and we'll look at that. In you, we know that the major elements that you need are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, but how does that translate into what the actual macromolecules are? Turns out that all 4 of these major elements are also responsible for building the majority of our macromolecules. So in you, we look at proteins and nucleic acids, carbohydrates and lipids as being the majority of what you are. Now we know that you are mostly water, but if we break down that large molecule group that's about 25% of you, we look at roughly half of that being proteins, roughly a quarter of that being nucleic acids, and then the rest being carbohydrates and lipids. Now this is very individual, right? So when we look at proteins, we look at things like muscle structure, right? So how this breaks down in different individuals will be different, and certainly between different species.